I thank God because we are back, and we are back with a bang. It is about the hurdles of a marriage, especially the hurdles of a young marriage. And we are looking at sculpturing a God-fearing marriage. And we said there are 5 things that we can say are practical aspects of sculpturing the marriage in a God-fearing way. The 5th one is submission. We say we know what it doesn't look like. It's not like being sat upon by someone else who is more powerful than you, and you are down there wailing and languishing under the weight of this boss. That's not submission. And we said it's also not something like somebody being liberated, having been under bondage, and now has become the one who is ruling and therefore is calling the shots. That's not how the other person submits. We know for sure the Bible expects us to submit to one another, whether we are believers who are married or not. Everyone should submit to each other. A believer should submit to the other believer. And more so, wives should also submit to their husband, and husbands should submit to their wives, because they are also believers. All believers should submit. Doesn't exempt the men from submitting, because they are also believers. If the wife is a believer and all believers should submit to one another, then men should submit to believers who are their wives. And the wives should also submit to their husbands. That one is needless. We don't need to say. It's been there for some time. But I want us to be a bit more practical, because we asked 2 questions before we took a break. Number 1, how do women show their submission? They do not necessarily have to be under their men like they are being the slaves. And they don't necessarily have to go to Beijing for the gender equality conference and come out with a mandate to also become ruling powers. They don't need women conferences, they don't need FIDA to liberate them so that they can make men also be under submission. They don't. But there is something that they can do. And that's what I want us to start with. Practical question number 1. How do wives demonstrate their submission? We are looking at practical cases in this part of the episode. How do wives demonstrate their submission? I want to give a caveat in advance to the men, because as I will mention in the other program, God has set out a structure for marriages to be run. And at the helm of the leadership of a marriage, God has put a man. He didn't put both man and woman to lead. He put man to lead. That's God's way of doing it. We can't question him. We can't ask him a question. We can't tell him it's wrong. We can't have 2 leaders at a go. But as that happens, it has nothing to do with dominion and domineering anyone. I'll explain it further when we get there. But it has to do with somebody being sure that they are following what God is expecting. They are following and supporting a leader who should be able to take them to what God expects them to do. It's more of people in a company, though they are not weak than the leader. Some members of a company who are being led by the leaders in the company, they are stronger than the leaders, but they are not the leaders. But they support the leaders. The fact that someone is in leadership doesn't mean he's the strongest in the company. And the fact that the husband is the head of the house doesn't make him as a man stronger than the wife. As a matter of fact, there are some women who are very strong. Strong at will, strong at resolve, strong at decision making, strong at management. They're strong in very many ways compared to their husbands. But that doesn't mean the husband is not the leader. He's still the leader. Because when God put the husband there, he knows why he is doing so. And I will spend a whole long list of episodes to cover these kind of things. But wives cannot submit to a man properly when it is not in godly model. I'm not giving women a reason to refuse to submit, but I'm just giving a caveat to the men that when God's model of marriages and running of a marriage is not followed, things don't work properly. Just as like we said in the first part of the first episode. If marriages are not going to be run sinless, then God's model does not work in it. It does not work in it. You end up becoming responsible for your own actions because you are running your own model that God did not introduce. God introduced a model with his own blessings. If you run your own model, you'd rather cater for the blessings and plan for the future insurance of those blessings. If some things are not happening in your marriage simply because of your own way of running a new model, it's not God's problem. It's your own problem of running that marriage using a new model that is not insured by God. So women are likely to submit to a man who is also in submission to God. T.D. Jakes says this: no woman wants to be in submission to a man who isn't in submission of God. Your wife knows you're a big liar. She will not stop lying. She will lie like you. Your husband is not likely going to tell you as a wife to stop doing what he does. That's the point. So if the husband is not obeying God, the wife disobeys him as well. There is a lot that will not work according to what God expects, including wives not submitting. I'll come to the wives as well. I'm just on the husbands now because I want to answer the question, how do wives demonstrate their submission? I'll take two practical cases. One is this: a wife trusts a husband or the husband to make the right decisions, especially when these decisions are done in her absence. Imagine this situation. The husband has to make a decision that concerns the whole family, but the wife is not there, and he decides to make the decision. A good example is the husband has to decide how much money is going to be paid for a specific item, like a dining table or a good sofa set, when the wife is not there. But the wife, of course, has her own wishes. We know women will have their own wishes with the things of the house. But the husband is alone and has to make that decision. The wife is not there. Probably he will call her and ask her about the color. Probably. I'll talk about such kind of a thing. But probably he may not be able to make the decision about how much money to pay. He may not be able to talk with her about that decision because it depends on how much money he has or how much money he thinks should be allocated to the dining table or the sofa set. And the husband decides, I'm not going to pay more than 10,000 Kenya shillings for this dining table. That's an example. Or a sofa set. And the wife is not there. But the husband has to make the decision now, because perhaps it's now that he should do it. And he makes the decision. What do the wives do in that case? Godly wives. Wives who are in a marriage where God-fearing element is part of the sculpturing of the marriage. They accept the decision made by their husbands. It may have mistakes. They accept the decision made by their husbands and carry on with it, because the buying of the dining table should not make the marriage ungodly by having more problems just because the husband made a decision that the wife did not like. She trusts the decision that the husband made the decision out of a certain reason. And probably the much she can do is ask, why did you buy this one instead of that one? And she will. If the wife does not trust the decision of the husband and start disputing it for something like, we should even have taken the money for some part of the school fees and pay the dining table, we can, even the clothes can wait, you should even have added, you even have money. Others even start complaining, you have never bought something for me, you didn't even want to pay something extra here, and more complaints come in. That way, the wives are not submitting. They're not trusting the man's decision in that case. Case number 2. The wife takes heed to husband's guidance and correction even when she does not understand the wisdom behind the counsel. The husband is there, knocking on that door of the woman's heart, telling her, this is wrong. I think we shouldn't do this. I think you are doing the wrong thing. I think this is not right. Let's not go this way, let's go this way. And the wife is not ready perhaps to take it. The only way she can demonstrate submission in that context is by accepting the guidance that is being given by the husband. And say, I know my husband is actually using some wisdom from God, because I as a wife believe that there is a reason as to why my husband is refusing this. Why doesn't my husband want us to go and visit that family? Why? There must be some wisdom. And sit down and think about it. And you as a wife, you agree with your husband under some circumstance that you may not be very comfortable with, but because you are in submission. Let us finish by asking ourselves the second question. How do men show submission by their love? The Bible talks about men loving their wives. And this becomes interesting because sometimes men go wrong. And that's when you can show love. Case number 1, or practical case number 1 here is this. The husband says, I'm sorry when his actions or decisions are faulty. Going back to the table or the sofa set. The wife is supposed to submit. No argument. No creating drama. But also the man, as a submissive person, a member of the family, as God expects, he will say, I'm sorry perhaps. If he feels there is a mistake he didn't make that decision rightly, perhaps he should have waited and talk to the wife later and agree with her instead of just buying the table quickly. Agree with the wife later first before buying it and say, I'm sorry I made this decision. That's love, but submission. It's love for the wife because he's not saying I'm sorry because he's under pressure. The man can say, I don't care. You don't have to force me to do what I want. The man has the right to say that, or he is able to do that, sorry. Not that he has a right. He can, but he chooses not to. He says, I'm sorry. Next time I'll ask you. And they move on. Sometimes we call it leading with a limp. Perhaps it's one of the weakness of the man, making decisions in a hurry. He's not very good at making decisions in a hurry. Perhaps it's the wife who is good at that. He is leading with a limp. Dan Allender calls it leading with a limp. And I want to read what he says. Dan Allender in his book, Leading with a Limp, says, sometimes the quickest way path up is down. And likewise, the surest success comes through being honest about failure. Probably the husband at this point says, I'm sorry, accept the failure, and goes up quickly instead of accepting that he is right and continue falling. Case number 2 and the last one. The husband consults. Again, as I said at the dining table, consult with the wife first. This is a way of showing love, but it is submission. What do you think we should do with this dining table? It is costing more than the money that I think we should put in. Consult. And if that happens, then those are practical ways of making sure that we are sculpturing a marriage that God is feared. And up to this point, I would like to say, God bless you and your newly started marriage. We'll continue talking about these things. Shalom, and God bless you all.